All right. Great afternoon. Good afternoon. Friday. As we said yesterday, the Secretary General will be getting on a plane later today where he will be traveling, making his way to Bangladesh. He will be in Dhaka on Sunday and in Cox's Bazar on Monday, and back in New York late Tuesday evening. And as we mentioned yesterday, this is a joint trip with the President of the World Bank, Jim Kim, and they will also be accompanied by the High Commissioner for Refugees and the Executive Director of UNFPA. And to continue on our travel section, the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed will be traveling this weekend to participate in the 31st African Union Summit that's taking place in Nouakchott in Mauritania on the 1st and 2nd of July. She will then travel on to South Sudan, Chad, Niger, starting July 3rd in a joint visit with the African Union and the Foreign Minister of Sweden, Margot Wallström. Their visit will highlight women's participation in peace, security, and development in the three countries, with an additional focus on climate security and the Sahel. In South Sudan, on the 3rd and 4th of July, the Deputy Secretary General will have bilateral meetings with the authorities in Juba. She will visit a protection of civilians site, a hospital that treats victims of gender-based violence and community resilience programs. She will also hold meetings with women leaders, religious leaders, and civil society groups, among others. In Chad, on the 5th and 6th of July, she will have meetings with authorities in N'Djamena. She will also be traveling to a project site to meet with communities adapting to climate change and meet with religious, youth, and women's groups. And in Niger, on the 7th and 8th of July, Amina Mohammed will have bilateral meetings with the authorities in that country. She will also meet with leaders of women's groups and visit a women's health center in Niamey. The African Union Special Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, Bineta Diop, will join the Deputy Secretary General of three countries, and Margot Wallström will join in Chad and Niger. And the Deputy Secretary General is expected back in New York on 9 July, and where she will brief the Security Council on the topics of women, peace, and security in the Sahel the following day, and that will fall under the presidency of Sweden. The Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, will be heading to Haiti and Panama from the 3rd to the 5th of July. In Haiti, he is expected to meet with government officials, humanitarian partners, and people in need of humanitarian assistance and protection. He will call for increased international support for the government-led emergency preparedness efforts for sudden onset disasters, as well as the ongoing response to food insecurity and cholera. In Panama, Mr. Lowcock plans to meet with the government and the regional development and humanitarian partners and reiterate the support for regional preparedness efforts for sudden onset disasters, as well as principled humanitarian support where required. And you will have seen earlier today the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein, called on all sides of the conflict in Syria to end the escalating violence in DARA'A Governorate, abide by their obligations under international law, and avoid a repetition of the bloodshed and suffering seen in earlier this year in eastern Ghouta. And on Yemen, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the fighting and shelling have reportedly decreased in HODEIDAH Governorate, but airstrikes continue to be reported, especially in southern districts. Families continue to be forced to leave their homes and their governorate. Displacement is affecting the capacity of institutions to provide basic social services due to the absence of staff. In HODEIDAH city itself, they report most shops and commercial activities remain closed. Approximately 42,000 people have now received emergency assistance. Some 18,000 emergency kits have been pre-positioned in HODEIDAH, containing food rations for a family for a week, as well as basic hygiene requirements and other essential items. Partners continue to pre-position additional supplies. About 76,000 metric tons of wheat grain have been pre-positioned, sufficient for 988,000 household items for 1 month. For 998,000 households for 1 month. And turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Central African Republic, the peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic tells us that the anti-Balaka commander, Wekenam Crépin, also known as Pépin and also known as Pino Pino, and more than 30 associated people extradited yesterday from the capital of the DRC to Bangui in the Central African Republic. The group includes women and juveniles, although it is not yet clear whether they were combatants. Crépin was arrested by the armed forces of the DRC on May 15th after crossing the border from the Central African Republic, along with 33 members of his group. He is suspected of involvement in the attack that led to the death of 5 UN peacekeepers in Yongo-Fongo in the Central African Republic on May 8th of last year, as well as attacks against civilians in and around Bangassou in the southeast part of the country. The UN mission coordinated the extradition in conjunction with the authorities of the Central African Republic and with the support of the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as well as our UN peacekeeping colleagues in that country. And today, the UN Refugee Agency and the UN Migration Agency released their proposal to the European Union for a regional arrangement to ensure the predictable disembarkation and processing of people rescued at sea. The proposal stresses that disembarkation should be shared responsibility across the Mediterranean basin with due respect for the safety and dignity of all people on the move. It also notes the need to address the drivers of forced displacement and irregular migration. More information on their respective websites. After we are done and you are done with Brendan, 1:15, there'll be a briefing here by Agnès Marcaillou, who, as you know, heads up the UN's UN's Mine Action Service, and Ambassador Laurently Solis, the permanent representative of Bolivia to the UN, and they will be briefing you ahead of the Security Council's briefing on mine action. 2 p.m., Phumzile Mlombo Nguka, Executive Director of UN Women, will be here along with Achim Steiner, UNDP Administrator, to brief on the ongoing counterterrorism conference. This will take place at the delegates' entrance stakeout of the General Assembly building. 2 p.m. On Monday, after the noon briefing, there will be a briefing by Ambassador Olof Skog, the permanent representative of Sweden, who assumes the presidency of the Security Council for the month of July, and he'll be here to brief you on the program of work of the month of July. Today is what day? What international day is today? It's hot. Quit smoking? Yeah, that's should be. I think it's every day. It's the International Day of the Tropics. As you know, the tropics are in the area between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. We learn things here in this briefing room. And hosts approximately 80% of the world's biodiversity and much of its language and cultural diversity. The day celebrates this diversity while highlighting the challenges in the region, such as climate change, deforestation, and urbanization. 2 more days, and tomorrow is one of my favorite days of the year. It is International Asteroid Day, which raises awareness about the impact hazard of asteroids and informs the public about the crisis communication actions to be taken at the global level in case of a credible near-Earth object threat. Don't laugh. When the sky falls, you'll be coming here, James. And tomorrow, for the first time, we will mark the International Day of Parliamentarism. I also learned a new word today. This day celebrates the ways in which the parliamentary systems of government improve the day-to-day lives of people the world over. It is also an opportunity for parliaments to take stock, identify challenges, and ways to address them effectively. And the money is starting to trickle back in. After not being able to report some good news for a while. We have now reached 105 as our friends in Honduras have paid their budget dues in full, and we are now at 105.
Thank you, Stéphane. On the SG's visit to Myanmar, I was wondering why the SG's special envoy for Myanmar is not attending the trip.
He's going to Bangladesh. Did I say?
But he's visiting.
I know.
Sorry,
I understand.
He's visiting the Rohingya
he's
refugees.
Visiting Bangladesh. The focus of the visit is on the refugees, the need to increase the support, financial support for the refugees, the need to help Bangladesh support this very large refugee population. So it's really one looking at humanitarian and development issues.
Thanks, Stéphane. Is there any updates on the humanitarian situation and situation in general in DARA'A? And during the meeting yesterday between the Jordanian Foreign Minister with the SG, did the SG ask the foreign minister about opening the borders for the refugees, and especially that Mr. Safadi made it clear that he called the UN and all other countries to focus on providing the help to these displacement people in Syria, not anywhere else.
First of all, I think we all need to recognize the amazing generosity that Jordan and Jordanian people have been providing to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Syrians who have sought refuge, and they are not just in camps, but they've been hosted in communities. And the Jordanian people have really opened their hearts and their doors to them. And I think we appreciate those extraordinary efforts. As a matter of principle, civilians who are fleeing violence should always be afforded protection. We, the UN system, our humanitarian partners, will provide help to them wherever they are, and UNHCR and other humanitarian partners had prepositioned supplies. There are some cross-border convoys going in. Obviously, the answer to all of this is a halt to the fighting, and the Secretary General's. The Secretary General has been very much, he's been on the phone quite a bit with various interlocutors. His aim is to avoid a bloody battle in the area, which would have catastrophic humanitarian consequences. And it's important that everyone who has influence over the parties, or who is directly involved, regroup and focus on a political solution.
Mr. Safadi said that the UN should provide the aid and help to these people in Syria. Can you, under these circumstances?
Yes, we are providing. There are cross-border convoys going in, and we are reaching. We will help people wherever they are, and we are reaching them in some of those areas. Let's just stick to Al Jazeera.
Because it's sort of a follow-up question on a related subject. Does the Secretary General believe he and Mr. de Mistura were tricked, used with regard to de-escalation zones, in that those de-escalation zones were simply used by the Syrian government and the Syrian army as a way of concentrating their military efforts on one area, not to overextend themselves, and then move to the next area?
Look, this conflict has been going on for 8 years now. I don't think we're not in the business of being offended by what one of the parties do. We are, as humanitarians, offended by the suffering of the Syrian people that has been going on for too long. We are continuing to work with the parties to push for a political settlement. Mr. de Mistura continues to be hard at work. As I said, I mean, an increase in fighting in that part of Syria, continued fighting, would have catastrophic humanitarian consequences. Masoud, then Matthew.
Thank you. On this Yemen, which you just talked about, how Mr. Martin Griffiths has said that there seems to be some sort of an agreement that this Saudis will not attack Hodeidah port in Aden right now, but will that? How long will that truce last? And do you have any information as to how long when will this be finalized? That this
his discussions are going on. He was in Oman, where he met with the chief negotiator for Ansar Allah. He is trying to do his best to avoid an attack on Hodeidah city, which, like I said for the previous issue, would also have catastrophic humanitarian consequences in an area which has already suffered greatly. His aim is and he has continued to try, and I think he feels successfully narrowing down with the parties what needs to be agreed in order to avoid this final push-off, in doing what he can to avoid an attack on Hodeidah. And as he said, he would like to see the parties back at the table within the next weeks.
So has there been an agreement by the Saudi coalition that they will not?
I think when there is an agreement, we will announce such an agreement.
Sure. I wanted to ask you about on the issue of sexual harassment and the UN seemingly ineffective investigation mechanisms, about Gina Moore's story in the New York Times, where she said basically there's three things about it I want to ask you about. One seems to say that when here in headquarters, when a person went to complain on behalf of a victim, they were told that they would have to tell everything that they knew, and that their identity as well as of the victims would be turned over to the alleged perpetrator. I also wanted to ask you about a part of the article where it says that it was said that a supervisor saying they liked having loose women with sexy clothes in the office wasn't considered harassment. There's a direct quote from the article, so I'm not. And the other one, I guess, it has to do with inconsistency between UNFPA and World Food Program in terms of even the standard of proof they apply to complaints. So what is the UN? Are these things false, or what's your response?
I have no doubt to doubt the veracity of the quotes in the story. I'm not going to try to. I have no reason to doubt that, and I can't comment on these cases. Obviously, those kinds of comments, as you made, are unacceptable in this workplace or any other workplace. OIO at the urging of the Secretary General over the last few months, I think OIOS has clearly upgraded the way it handles sexual harassment investigations. It now puts a priority on them. It is in the process of hiring a whole batch of investigators that will be specialized in sexual harassment cases. Overwhelmingly, we hope that this new group of investigators will be women investigators. The aim of their approach is really a victim-centered approach to conduct the interviews in a way that is mindful of the issue that is being talked about, and obviously consider cultural and community based issues. I think we've overall there is now a much better system to handle these complaints. There is a hotline that is fully functioning. We are in the process of populating a system-wide database of people who have been let go for sexual harassment reasons, or who have left the organization prior to the conclusion of an investigation. That will enable the system to do better reference check to make sure that people don't get let go, leave one part of the UN system to be hired by another. This is a top priority of the Secretary General, and as he's often said, he also sees it as a power issue, as a gender power issue, and that's why he's already achieved more than 50% gender balance in the senior management group, in the RCs. I think this is something that is very, very close to the heart of the Secretary General. Obviously, part of the work of the CB that was done a couple of months ago is the harmonization of policies across the system to make sure that things are dealt with in as much as they can in the same manner. Obviously, a lot of the organizations have different governing bodies, different structures, and different rules. But this is the issue of sexual harassment is one that all of the leaders of the UN system are fully seized of.
Just thanks a lot. When you say harmonization, what is the standard of proof? Is it beyond beyond a reasonable doubt, or is it clear and convincing evidence? It seems to I think
that's obviously one of the issues that they're trying to look at.
And on OIOS, I'd asked you earlier in the week, and you'd said you don't keep track of people's leave, which is a fine answer, except that Heidi Mendoza is the USG. So I thought if a USG goes on leave for any length of time, there's an officer in charge. And I'm asking because there are other issues that are in front of OIOS in which there's been no action. So is there an officer in charge or not?
There's always an officer in charge. And
who is the officer in charge?
I don't know who the officer in charge, but there's always somebody in charge. And right now, I'm in charge, Mr. James.
There is a new EU migration deal, which some NGOs, for example MSF, say is going to lead to more people dying at sea. Does the UN have a comment?
I think, as I mentioned, our colleagues at the International Organization of Migration at UNHCR have looked at what was agreed to. They have submitted quite a long list of suggestions to the European Union on how to manage the flow, on ensuring that the responsibility for disembarkation of migrants from the Mediterranean be shared across the Mediterranean basin, and most importantly, that the safety and the dignity of people who are on the move be respected at all times. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you mentioned that you thank Jordan's role in so far hosting up to over 1 million Syrian refugees. But do you not think that given the proximity of Jordan, that despite what it's already been done, they still have a responsibility towards assisting the refugees that have now reached its borders and are currently stuck there? I mean, yes, we understand that Jordan has carried a giant burden so far, but does this exclude it from now its current responsibility towards these refugees?
Geography plays a role, but it would really be unfair to say that that Lebanon and Jordan and Turkey have the greatest responsibility. The responsibility to take care of the humanitarian situation in Syria is a global responsibility. And I think if you look at the three countries that I've mentioned, whether it's Turkey, whether it's Lebanon, whether it's Jordan, and there are others, have really shouldered their responsibilities in ways that really should put others to shame sometimes. And so we are fully mindful of what Jordan has already done. And as I said, people on the move need protection. We will provide humanitarian help to people wherever they are.
Stéphane, do you have any, on immigration too, but in this country, do you have any comments regarding the way the U.S. government is treating undocumented immigrants and also the new plans to build camps on military bases or land, and whether somebody from your office is following up on these issues?
Look, we're all, I think, following... We're all following these. We're all following these issues extremely close. The Secretary General has a number of principal positions which have remained unchanged. He's expressed those publicly. Obviously, the need to keep families together. Ever since his time as High Commissioner for Refugees, I think he has advocated for a strong push and prosecution of those who smuggle human beings, of those who traffic in human beings. But he has also stood firm and spoken out loudly against the criminalization of irregular migrants. And that continues to be his position. Masoud.
Stéphane, well, this is a follow-up on Secretary General's visit to Bangladesh and Cox's Bazar. In that area, will he, specifically, will he be talking with the Rohingya refugees? Will he be talking about them being repatriated to them? And also
the aim of the visit is for him to speak to those people, to those men, women, and children who have fled Myanmar for all the reasons that we know. Some of them have been in Bangladesh for a number of years. Others have arrived over the last year. They have suffered tremendously, especially women. We've all seen and know about the reports of rape and assault. He will be visiting UNFPA-led centers that is dealing with victims and survivors of gender-based violence. He will not be so much talking to them as he will be listening to them and listening to their stories, listening to their plight, listening to their suggestions. When and if they return is up to them. Return has to be voluntary, it has to be safe, and it has to be dignified.
So what about the safe passage that they need to get back to their place in Myanmar? Has he had any assurances from the Myanmar government?
I don't think that it is not the UNHCR's position or anybody else's position that I think the time is not ripe for them, and the conditions on the ground are not just yet ripe for them to return. Mr. Lee and then James.
Sure. I want to ask you about Burundi, the AU, and something about the High Commissioner on Human Rights. there was a meeting between the Secretary General and an official of the East Africa Commission, after which they gave a readout. He didn't, but their readout says that he praised them for their work on Burundi, and also said that he would be participating in the AU summit in Mauritania. As to Burundi, I wanted to know
who would be participating in
the Secretary General. I'm reading it.
Well, the Deputy Secretary General is representing the Secretary General, as I just said. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. She's going there. Maybe they misunderstood what he said. But what I guess my question is it the case that he commended the EAC for its work on Burundi, given that in the same week in the Human Rights Council, the panel that studies Burundi said there's been massive abuse of rights and killing? Is he
I don't think there's been massive abuse of rights of killing by the East African community.
No, by Burundi.
And
so
I think
does he feel that their work on Burundi has been successful, given the killings in Burundi?
I don't think anybody is satisfied with the situation in Burundi. We continue to work very closely in the discussions that are being led by the EAC, and we continue to support their work.
And is Mr. Kohler going to the AU?
I don't know. It's a good question. I saw the press report, but I've not received a call from Herr Kohler.
The Human Rights Board, go ahead and call.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, there was a Q&A by Kate Gilmore, the Deputy High Commissioner of Human Rights, today in Geneva, and an issue arose in which several whistleblowers raised the fact that they believe that they have evidence. They say that the spokesman for Prince Zaid, Rupert Colville, has, on his UN computer during UN time, said that the whistleblowers are the worst people he's ever known, used a profanity. And so they wanted to know, since it's their understanding that this was then said in a personal capacity by the spokesman, not as a UN statement, whether the UN will in fact waive immunity so that they can take some kind of a legal action. They're very troubled that the spokesman for the High Commissioner. This was a Q&A with Kate Gilmore. You can check it out.
I didn't see the Q&A. What I do know is that Mr. Colville does an outstanding job in promoting and defending human rights.
Would you say it's consistent with the whistleblower protection policy to trash whistleblowers?
I'm not going to talk about things that I don't know most of the time.
A human rights-related question, again, Iraq. And the Iraqi Prime Minister has ordered the execution of hundreds of suspects that may be members of ISIL.
It's obviously something that's of grave concern to us. We have had dialogue with the Iraqi authorities on the use of the death penalty, which is obviously something that we stand firmly against. Masood.
Thank you. Stéphane, do you have anything to say about this Gaza teenager in Gaza shot dead by the Israeli authorities today? Do you have any?
I didn't see that particular report.
Any
today.
reaction?
I didn't see that particular. Mr.